If you've ever been the family scapegoat who everyone underestimated, hit that like button and subscribe right now. You're not going to want to miss what happened next. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and for 28 years, I'd been the disappointment of the Rodriguez family. Not because I'd failed at anything, but because I hadn't succeeded in the ways my family understood. My brother Marcus was the golden child. Graduated from business school, married Amanda who came from old money, worked at our father's commercial real estate firm. Every family dinner was a celebration of Marcus's latest deal, Marcus's new car, Marcus and Amanda's vacation to the Maldives. I was the artist, the dreamer, the one who wasted my college years studying architecture instead of business, the one who worked at a small sustainable design firm instead of joining the family company, the one who lived in a modest apartment in the arts district instead of the suburbs where respectable people lived. Elena's just going through a phase, my mother would say at family gatherings as if I were still 19 instead of 28. She'll realize eventually that real success means financial stability. What they didn't know was that I had financial stability. Lots of it. They didn't know because the one person who truly understood me had asked me to keep it secret. My grandmother Margaret had been different from the rest of the Rodriguez family. While they worshipped money and status, she'd valued creativity, integrity, and independence. She'd been an architect herself back in the 1960s, one of the few women in the field. She understood what it meant to be dismissed, underestimated, and to prove everyone wrong. Elena, she told me 3 years before she passed, sitting in her sunroom surrounded by her architectural sketches, I'm going to do something and I need you to trust me. I'm going to transfer my properties to you, all 12 of them. But I don't want anyone to know yet. I'd been shocked. Grandma, those properties are worth millions. Exactly. And your brother thinks they're coming to him. Your parents think they're coming to them. I want to see who people really are when they think there's an inheritance at stake. Her eyes had been sharp, knowing. I want you to see it too. So you'll know who deserves a place in your life when I'm gone. The properties were remarkable. Grandma Margaret had bought them strategically over 40 years. 8 residential buildings in gentrifying neighborhoods, 3 commercial spaces in the downtown arts district, and a historic building she'd restored herself. Together, they generated approximately $147,000 in monthly rental income. We'd worked with her attorney, David Chin, to transfer everything into a trust with me as the sole beneficiary. The transfers were legal, recorded, and absolutely binding. But Grandma Margaret had kept paying the property taxes from her personal account. She'd kept managing everything herself. To the family nothing had changed. Just watch, she'd said. Watch what they do when they think you're getting nothing. Watch what they say about you. Then you'll know the truth. She'd been right. The moment Grandma Margaret died, the mask came off. At her funeral, before her body was even in the ground, Marcus had pulled me aside in the church parking lot. Just so you know, Elena, the properties are going to be managed professionally now. By me. Dad and I have already discussed converting some to luxury condos. We'll finally make them profitable. They're already profitable, I'd said quietly. He'd laughed. Barely. Grandma was too sentimental, renting to artists and nonprofits at below market rates. That's going to change. I'd said nothing. Just like Grandma Margaret had taught me, watch and document. Over the next 3 months I watched plenty. I watched Marcus hire an expensive property appraiser and start planning renovations before the will was even read. I watched him tell tenants, people who'd lived in those buildings for decades, that their rents would be doubling. I watched him schedule meetings with developers about tearing down the historic building that Grandma Margaret had spent 10 years restoring. I watched my parents nod along with everything, talking about their share of the inheritance, planning their retirement to Scottsdale. I watched Amanda post on social media about finally getting what we deserve, and waiting for deadweight to get cleared away. And I watched them talk about me. Elena's just going to have to accept that she's not getting anything, my mother said at a family dinner I wasn't invited to, but my cousin Maria recorded for me. Margaret was generous to include her in the will at all. She'll probably get some jewelry or books. If she's smart, she won't make a fuss, Marcus added. We might throw her a bone. Let her rent one of the commercial spaces at a discount for her little design projects. Amanda's laugh was cruel. Why would we do that? She's never contributed anything to this family. She doesn't deserve our charity. I listened to that recording 3 times. Each time Grandma Margaret's words echoed in my mind, "Now you know the truth." But I wasn't just watching. I was building. What my family didn't know was that I hadn't just been playing artist for the past 10 years. I'd been creating something extraordinary. My small sustainable design firm was called Verde Architecture, and I was the founder and principal architect. We specialized in adaptive reuse, taking old, forgotten buildings and transforming them into sustainable, beautiful spaces. In the past 5 years, we'd completed 18 major projects across 3 states. Our revenue last year? $8.3 million. My personal income? $340,000, not including the rental income from Grandma Margaret's properties. I'd been featured in Architectural Digest twice. I'd won the National AIA Young Architects Award. I'd been invited to speak at conferences in Barcelona, Tokyo, and Toronto. But I'd done it all quietly. I used my mother's maiden name professionally, Elena Reyes instead of Elena Rodriguez. I didn't post about my success on social media. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. I kept my modest apartment even though I could afford much better. Why? Because Grandma Margaret had taught me to value the work over the recognition. And because I'd wanted to see exactly what she wanted me to see, who my family really was when they thought I had nothing. The rental properties Grandma Margaret had left me weren't just valuable, they were perfectly aligned with my work. 3 of the residential buildings were in neighborhoods where artists and young families were being priced out. The commercial spaces housed a ceramic studio, a community theater, and a non-profit arts education center. The historic building contained 6 affordable live-work spaces for emerging artists. For 3 years I'd been working with David Chin to not just maintain these properties but improve them. We'd added solar panels. We'd upgraded insulation and windows. We'd created a rent stabilization program that protected long-term tenants. We'd established a scholarship fund for young artists who couldn't afford studio space. The properties now generated $147,000 monthly, $1.76 million annually, while providing affordable housing and creative space for over 200 people. Marcus's plan to convert them to luxury condos would destroy all of that. It would displace every single tenant. It would erase Grandma Margaret's legacy. It would also be completely illegal since he didn't own the properties. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. The estate meeting was scheduled for October 15th, exactly 4 months after Grandma Margaret's death. David Chin had been legally required to wait through the probate period, even though the properties had already been transferred years earlier. I'd asked David not to tell Marcus about the transfers yet. "I want to hear what he plans to do," I'd explained. "I need to document his intentions." David had been reluctant but he'd agreed. "Just remember, Elena, this is going to be ugly." He had no idea how ugly. The meeting was held at Marcus's house, a 6,000 square foot McMansion in the suburbs that he and Amanda had bought with money from my father. The formal dining room had been set up like a boardroom with Marcus at the head of the table. Present were Marcus and Amanda, my parents Robert and Patricia, my Aunt Linda and Uncle James, David Chin and me. I'd arrived exactly on time, carrying my laptop bag and wearing one of my usual outfits. Jeans, a simple blouse, minimal jewelry. I looked like exactly what they thought I was. The poor relation who'd be grateful for whatever scraps they threw me. Marcus was wearing a custom suit. He had documents spread across the table. Property valuations, renovation estimates, development proposals. He'd clearly spent weeks preparing this presentation. "Thanks for coming, everyone," he began, standing at the head of the table like a CEO addressing his board. "I know this has been a difficult time, but Grandma Margaret would want us to handle her estate professionally and profitably." My mother nodded approvingly. Amanda was recording on her phone, probably planning to post about the big inheritance later. "David has finalized the probate process," Marcus continued, gesturing to the attorney. "Everything is in order. As executor of the estate and Grandma Margaret's oldest grandson, I've taken the liberty of developing a comprehensive plan for the properties." He clicked open a PowerPoint presentation. The first slide read, "Maximizing the Margaret Rodriguez estate, a development opportunity." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. I opened my laptop, appearing to take notes. Actually, I was recording everything, audio and video, through a discrete camera in my laptop bag. Marcus walked through his plan. Convert 8 residential buildings to luxury condos. Evict all current tenants. Sell the commercial spaces to a developer who wanted to build a boutique hotel. Demolish the historic building and sell the land. Projected profit, $43 million. Of course, Marcus said, smiling around the table. This will be split among the family members named in the will. Dad and Mom will receive 40%. Linda and James 20%. I'll retain 30% as executor and project manager and... He paused, looking at me with something between pity and contempt. Elena, Grandma left you her jewelry collection and her architectural books. We've had them appraised at approximately $15,000. You'll receive that in cash, since we assumed you wouldn't have space for the physical items in your apartment. The room was silent. Everyone was watching me, waiting to see if I'd cry or protest or beg for more. I smiled and closed my laptop. That's very generous, I said quietly. Can I ask a question? Marcus looked surprised that I wasn't fighting. Of course. These tenants you're planning to evict, have you notified them yet? No, but we'll begin the process next week. 60 days notice, everything legal. And the historic building, you're planning to demolish it? It's not profitable, Elena. Sentiment doesn't pay the bills. I nodded slowly. I see. And you've verified that you have legal authority to do all this. Marcus's smile became condescending. I'm the executor of the estate, Elena. I have complete authority. David, I said, turning to the attorney, is that accurate? David Chin cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable but professional. Actually, Marcus, I need to clarify something important. The preparation for this moment had taken 3 years. 3 years of watching, documenting, and building an ironclad case. Let me tell you what I'd been doing while Marcus planned his luxury condos. First, I'd worked with David Chin to ensure every aspect of the property transfer was legally bulletproof. We had original transfer documents signed by Grandma Margaret and witnessed by 3 independent parties. Recorded deeds at the county recorder's office, time-stamped and certified. Trust documents establishing me as sole beneficiary. Property tax records showing continuous ownership. Title insurance policies in my name. Bank accounts in my name receiving all rental deposits. Second, I documented everything Marcus had done since Grandma Margaret's death. Emails to tenants threatening rent increases and evictions. Contracts he'd signed with developers, using forged authorization. Money he'd spent from the estate account on preliminary planning, $47,000 so far. Conversations where he'd explicitly stated his plans to get rid of the deadweight tenants. His social media posts about the inheritance. Text messages between him and Amanda discussing how much they'd profit. Third, I'd hired my own investigator, a former FBI forensic accountant named Margaret Wu. She discovered that Marcus had been doing more than just planning. He'd taken unauthorized loans using the properties as collateral, $230,000. He'd collected rent payments over the past 4 months and deposited them in his personal account, $588,000. He'd filed fraudulent tax documents claiming ownership of the properties. He'd signed contracts with developers that included $150,000 in consultation fees, paid directly to him. Total amount Marcus had stolen or committed to spending, $1,015,000. All of this was documented in a 147-page investigative report with bank statements, forged documents, and email evidence. Margaret Wu had also identified potential federal charges: wire fraud, identity theft, and filing false tax documents. Fourth, I'd protected the tenants. I'd quietly visited each property, introduced myself as the actual owner, and assured them their leases were safe. I'd had David Chin send formal letters guaranteeing their tenancy rights. Several tenants, including the nonprofit director and a retired couple who'd lived in one building for 30 years, had provided sworn affidavits about Marcus's threats. Finally, I'd prepared for the emotional impact. I'd worked with my therapist to ensure I could stay calm during the confrontation. I'd practiced my statements. I'd anticipated every possible response and prepared for it. Grandma Margaret had taught me that revenge wasn't about anger. It was about precision. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to set boundaries with toxic family, because what happened next changed everything. David Chen's throat-clearing silenced the room. Marcus, he said carefully, You are the executor of Margaret Rodriguez's will. That's correct. But that role doesn't give you authority over these properties. Marcus frowned. What are you talking about? The properties are the primary asset of the estate. No, David said, opening his briefcase. They're not. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. These properties were transferred out of Margaret Rodriguez's estate 3 years ago. The transfers were legal, recorded, and irrevocable. They are not part of the probate process. Marcus grabbed the folder, Amanda leaning over his shoulder. I watched the color drain from his face as he flipped through page after page of transfer documents, recorded deeds and trust papers. This is... He sputtered. This can't be legal. She didn't have the mental capacity. She absolutely did, David interrupted. She was evaluated by 2 independent physicians before the transfers. Both confirmed full mental capacity. Their reports are in that folder. My father stood up, his face reddening. Who did she transfer them to? Linda? James. No, I said quietly, and everyone turned to look at me. I opened my laptop and pulled up a document on the screen. She transferred them to me. The room erupted. What? Amanda shrieked. That's impossible, my mother shouted. Marcus was shaking his head violently. No. Oh, this is fraud. You manipulated her. I did nothing of the sort, I said calmly. I pulled a USB drive from my bag and handed it to David, who plugged it into the TV mounted on the wall. The screen filled with a video, Grandma Margaret, sitting in David Chen's office, clearly alert and healthy. Her voice filled the room. I, Margaret Rodriguez, being of sound mind and body, do hereby transfer the following properties to my granddaughter, Elena Rodriguez, effective immediately. I make this decision freely without coercion, because Elena embodies the values I hold most dear: integrity, creativity, and compassion. She will protect these properties and the people who depend on them, which is something I cannot trust anyone else in my family to do. The video continued for 10 minutes. Grandma Margaret listed every property, explained her reasoning, and directly addressed potential challenges to her mental capacity. I know Marcus will claim I was confused or manipulated, she said, looking directly into the camera. I am neither. I'm simply choosing to leave my legacy to someone who deserves it. When the video ended, the room was silent except for my mother's sobbing. Then Marcus exploded. This is bullshit. You're a nobody, Elena. You work at some hippie design firm making poverty wages. You can't even manage your own life, let alone 12 properties worth millions. Actually, I said and pulled up another document on my laptop. Let me clarify a few things. I turned the screen so everyone could see. It showed the Verde Architecture website, with my photo prominently displayed as founder and principal architect. I don't work at a design firm. I own one. Verde Architecture generated $8.3 million in revenue last year. I personally earned $340,000, not including the $1.76 million annual income from Grandma Margaret's properties. My mother's mouth fell open. I clicked to the next slide, a photo of me receiving the AIA Young Architects Award. I've won multiple national awards for my work in sustainable architecture. I've been featured in Architectural Digest, Dwell, and Architect magazine. I've spoken at international conferences. I paused. I used my mother's maiden name professionally so none of you would know. I wanted to build something without your interference or your demands for money. Amanda was backing away from the table, her hand over her mouth. But I wasn't done. Now, Marcus, let's talk about what you've been doing for the past 4 months. I pulled out a second folder, the one Margaret Wu had prepared. You've collected $588,000 in rent from properties you don't own and deposited it in your personal account. That's theft. I slid a bank statement across the table highlighting the deposits. You've taken out $230,000 in unauthorized loans using these properties as collateral. That's fraud. Another document. Marcus's hands were shaking as he looked at it. You've signed contracts with developers that include $150,000 in consultation fees paid to you for properties you don't own. That's embezzlement and wire fraud. I looked at him steadily. You've stolen or committed to spending $1,015,000 of my money. The money was deposited into your accounts, which means there's a clear electronic trail. Federal investigators are very interested in cases involving wire fraud and identity theft. I didn't know. Marcus shouted. I thought the properties were mine. I thought. You thought wrong, I said. And even if you had owned them, collecting rent before probate was complete would still be illegal. You knew that. You chose to do it anyway. My father found his voice. Elena, surely we can work this out as a family. No, I said simply. We can't. Because here's what else I have. I pulled up the recordings, audio files of Marcus's conversations with tenants, threatening evictions. Emails to developers planning demolition. Text messages to Amanda about finally getting rid of the family's dead weight. I have documentation of every threat you made to my tenants. Every illegal contract you signed. Every dollar you stole. I looked around the table. All of you were planning to profit from displacing 200 people from their homes. Artists. Families. A non-profit that provides free art classes to underprivileged children. You were going to destroy all of that for money. My mother tried a different approach, her voice breaking. Elena, honey, we're family. No, I said, and my voice was harder now. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me for 28 years. Family doesn't call each other deadweight. Family doesn't laugh about throwing bones to the family failure. I played the recording from the dinner I hadn't been invited to. My mother's voice filled the room. Elena's just going to have to accept that she's not getting anything. Amanda's voice. She's never contributed anything to this family. She doesn't deserve our charity. I watched my mother's face crumble as she heard her own words played back. This is who you are, I said quietly. This is who you've always been. Grandma Margaret knew it. That's why she gave everything to me. Not because I manipulated her, but because she trusted me to do what she would have done. Protect the people who need protecting. At that moment there was a knock on the door. David Chin stood. That will be the federal agents. Marcus, I should inform you that the U.S. Attorney's Office has been investigating your financial activities for the past 6 weeks. Elena provided them with the evidence. 2 FBI agents entered, badges displayed. Behind them were 2 SEC investigators. Marcus Rodriguez, the lead FBI agent said. You're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and filing false tax documents. You have the right to remain in silence. Amanda started screaming. My mother collapsed into her chair. My father just stared at me, shock and disbelief on his face. As they handcuffed Marcus, he looked at me with pure hatred. You destroyed me, he hissed. No, I said. You destroyed yourself. You just assumed I'd never fight back. The agents led Marcus out. Amanda ran after them, sobbing. The room fell into chaos. My mother crying, my father shouting at David Chin, my aunt and uncle sitting in stunned silence. I calmly packed my laptop into my bag. Elena, my father said, his voice dangerous. You're making a mistake. We're still your family. You can't just. I can, I said. And I am. You're all removed from my life, effective immediately. Don't contact me. Don't come to my home. Don't try to explain or apologize. We're done. You'll regret this, my mother screamed through her tears. You'll be alone. I paused at the door and looked back at her. I'm not alone, Mom. I have people who love and respect me. I have business partners who believe in me. I have tenants who sent me cards thanking me for protecting their homes. I have colleagues who value my work. I have friends who've been documenting your behavior for years. I smiled. What I don't have is family who treats me like garbage while expecting me to be grateful for it. You're heartless. Amanda shouted from the doorway. Marcus made one mistake. One mistake. I pulled out my phone and showed her Margaret Wu's report. Page 47 details how Marcus has been embezzling from the family business for 3 years. Page 73 shows his gambling debts totaling $340,000. Page 89 documents his affair with his secretary, which you might want to read. Amanda's face went white. She snatched the phone, scrolling frantically through the report. I took my phone back. The affair details are on pages 89 through 104. There are photos. I'll email you the full report. I walked out, leaving Amanda standing frozen in the doorway. Behind me, I could hear my mother wailing, my father shouting, and Amanda demanding answers from the FBI agents about Marcus's other crimes. I got in my Honda Civic and drove away. I didn't look back. The consequences for my family came swiftly and completely. Within 24 hours, Marcus was denied bail due to flight risk. The $230,000 in unauthorized loans came due immediately, and his bank accounts were frozen by federal order. His credit cards were declined. Amanda tried to withdraw money from their joint accounts and discovered they were empty. Marcus had gambled most of it away. The story broke in the local news. Local businessman arrested for $1 million fraud scheme. The article detailed how Marcus had attempted to steal properties from his sister and had embezzled from his own family's company. Within 48 hours, my father's commercial real estate firm fired Marcus permanently and hired a forensic accountant to audit the books. They discovered Marcus had been skimming $15,000 monthly for 3 years, an additional $540,000 in theft. Amanda filed for divorce, citing the affair and financial deception. She moved back to her parents' house. Several of Marcus's victims, including tenants he'd threatened, filed a class action lawsuit against him seeking damages for emotional distress and attempted illegal eviction. Within 1 week, the bank foreclosed on Marcus and Amanda's McMansion. The mortgage was $890,000, and they'd used it as collateral for Marcus's fraudulent loans. They lost everything. The U.S. Attorney's Office expanded the charges to include embezzlement from the family business and racketeering. Marcus was facing 8 to 12 years in federal prison. My parents received a letter from the IRS. Marcus's fraudulent tax filings had listed them as co-beneficiaries of the stolen property income, making them potentially liable for tax fraud. They had to hire an expensive attorney to prove they weren't involved. My mother had a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized for 3 days. When she was released, she left my father and moved in with her sister in Florida. Within 30 days, Marcus pled guilty to avoid trial. He was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison with a requirement to pay full restitution. $1,555,000 to me, $540,000 to the family business, and $150,000 to defrauded investors. Amanda's divorce was finalized. She received nothing. The prenup she'd insisted on protected Marcus's assets, but there were no assets left to protect. My father's business nearly collapsed. Clients left in droves, not wanting to be associated with a firm whose manager had been convicted of fraud. He had to sell the business at a massive loss and declare personal bankruptcy. 3 months later, Marcus was in federal prison in Pennsylvania. Amanda was working as a receptionist at a dental office, living in a studio apartment. My father was working as a consultant, making a fraction of his former income. My mother refused to speak to him. My Aunt Linda called me once, asking if I'd help pay for my father's legal bills. I declined. 6 months later, I received a letter from Marcus in prison. It was 6 pages of excuses, blame, and eventual pleading. He claimed he'd been under financial pressure, that Amanda had expensive taste, that Dad had put too much pressure on him to succeed, that I should forgive him because we were blood. I threw it away without finishing it. While my family's world collapsed, mine flourished. I maintained Grandma Margaret's properties exactly as she would have wanted. I kept the affordable rents. I improved the buildings with sustainable upgrades. I started a grant program offering free studio space to emerging artists for their first 2 years. The historic building that Marcus wanted to demolish? I turned it into the Margaret Rodriguez Center for the Arts, a mixed-use space with affordable artist studios, a gallery, and a community workshop. We held the grand opening on what would have been Grandma Margaret's 80th birthday. Verde Architecture expanded. We hired 5 new architects and opened a second office. Our revenue this year will exceed $12 million. I've been invited to serve on the board of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I also built my chosen family. My business partner, James, who'd believed in me when I was just a junior architect with big dreams, became like a brother to me. My best friend Maria, who'd been documenting my family's cruelty for years, stood by me through everything. My mentor, Professor Chin, no relation to David, who'd taught me that architecture was about people, not just buildings, continued to guide me. And I met someone, an environmental engineer named Daniel, who understood that success wasn't about money or status, but about doing meaningful work. We got engaged last month. He proposed in the community garden we'd built together behind one of the residential buildings. My tenants threw us an engagement party. Over 200 people came, artists, families, nonprofit workers, business owners. They decorated the Margaret Rodriguez Center and made speeches about community and kindness. My biological family wasn't invited. I think about Grandma Margaret often. She'd wanted me to see the truth and I had. But she'd also taught me something more important. That family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who believes in you, who protects what you value instead of trying to exploit it. The properties she left me weren't just real estate. They were a test, a lesson, and a gift. The test showed me who my family really was. The lesson taught me to value myself. The gift gave me the resources to build something beautiful. A year after the confrontation, I received one more letter. This one from my mother. She apologized. She said she'd been wrong, that she'd let status and money corrupt her values, that she wanted to rebuild our relationship. I considered it carefully. I talked to my therapist. I discussed it with Daniel and Maria and James. Then I wrote back, I accept your apology, but I'm not interested in rebuilding a relationship. You taught me that family bonds aren't sacred, they're earned. You didn't earn them. I hope you find peace, but you'll find it without me. I meant it. Sometimes people ask if I regret how things turned out. If I wish I'd handled it differently. If I feel guilty about Marcus being in prison or my parents' business failing. I don't. They made their choices. They chose greed over integrity. They chose status over kindness. They chose to exploit and dismiss me, and when that backfired, they chose to blame me instead of taking responsibility. I chose differently. I chose to protect what mattered. I chose to build instead of destroy. I chose the people who deserved my loyalty. Grandma Margaret was right about everything. She knew exactly what would happen and she trusted me to handle it. I wake up every morning in a home I designed myself, next to a man who loves me for who I am, knowing that my work provides housing and opportunities for hundreds of people. I manage properties that honor my grandmother's legacy. I run a business that creates beautiful, sustainable spaces. My brother wakes up in a federal prison cell, serving 10 years for crimes he committed out of greed and entitlement. That's not revenge. That's just consequences. And consequences, as Grandma Margaret would say, are the best teacher of all. If you've ever had to walk away from toxic family to save yourself, tell me your story in the comments. What would you have done in my situation? Does any of this feel familiar? Because if you've been there, if you've ever been dismissed, exploited, or underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, I want you to know something important. You're not alone. You deserve better. And sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into. Grandma Margaret taught me that. And now I'm teaching it to every young person who rents studio space at the Margaret Rodriguez Center, every family living affordably in her buildings, every artist who gets a chance because someone believed in them. That's the legacy she left me. Not just properties and money, but the courage to demand better and the wisdom to build something that lasts. And that's worth more than any inheritance.